was responsible for selecting and researching their topic and preparing their paper. The topics that will be presented today were selected by the organic chemistry and physics students themselves. As an instructor and faculty advisor for this symposium, I want to thank and congratulate each participant for their effort, courage, and dedication. By participating, these individuals perpetuate this event annually. I am both proud and honored to present the work of these individuals. This will be my last science symposium since I am retiring in June. I want to acknowledge Dr. Casey Durande and Dr. Jennifer Weiss who have agreed to continue the science symposium, and I would like each to say a few words.
Dr. Durande and I are truly humbled to take over such a fantastic program. This symposium has been running since 1995, and in that time, over 700 students, just like you, have presented some amazing papers on science. In the following year, we hope to include biology and astronomy in addition to chemistry and physics, so that even more students have access to this valuable learning opportunity that truly makes PVCC stand out.
Dr. Mancini, on behalf of PVCC and the Science Department, I present this plaque to you, and thank you very much for everything you have done for this college, and especially for your students.
My deepest gratitude to both these individuals. The format of this symposium will be the following. I will introduce the presenter. They will come up. They will have roughly 10 to 15 minutes for presentation. We can entertain 3 minutes worth of questions. And at the conclusion of the symposium, I would ask that the students remain. The physics students will come up first, and they will each be given a flash drive, again with all of the programs, all of the papers on it. The organic chem students will come up. When I call their name, they will get their paper back with their paper grade, their final exam grade, and their final grade, along with a flash drive. So we have parting gifts for everyone. All right, to begin the symposium, the 18th Annual Science Symposium, I would like to introduce Rita Balian, who will talk to you about Adderall, the study drug. So please welcome Rita.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. I first almost like to say that. I really appreciate it, and I'm honored to be speaking here today. First of all, before I start my presentation, I'd like to have a show of hands of whoever has ever heard of Adderall, the prescription drug. Show of hands. Yeah, I assume that there would be a lot of people that's heard of it. Unfortunately, Adderall has become a study drug nowadays among college students. They're using it to study, and when they don't have the diagnosis ADHD, which that's what it's used for. Adderall comes in 2 mixtures. There's Adderall and Adderall XR, and they have a generic brand also. They're called amphetamine salts, which also comes in the XR form. Each capsule or tablet is composed of 4 amphetamine salts and dextroamphetamine salts. Amphetamine is a psychostimulant that was first synthesized by a Romanian chemist, Lazar Edlanu, in 1887. It was resynthesized in 1927 by Gordon Ailes, who was a psychopharmacologist, and he was a part of a group of researchers searching for a stimulant in substitute of ephedrine. It was resynthesized in 1927, and then in 1932 was when it was first available for pharmacological use, and it was a Benadryl inhaler, and it was used for congestion and asthma, which I'm sure most of you know Adderall, that is not what it's used for anymore. Popularity, unfortunately, grew in the drug. It's very addictive, so it became very popular among students, especially in the military. It grew the popularity because it was used predominantly in the Air Force to increase alertness in pilots. So they were beginning to get addicted to the prescription also. After decades of reported abuse, the FDA finally banned it in 1959. and it limited it to prescription use only. By the 1970s, 10 billion of these pills were being produced per year, and over 10% of them were used among people 14 and over by like any means, whether it was the pills, whether it was the tablets, the capsules. 14 years and older, everybody was using it. 10% of the population in the US, that's a great deal amount of people. By the 90s, a lot of them were being discontinued because of the addiction. One of them was called biphetamine, which the common name for it was Black Beauties, and that is the same decade that the brand Adderall first came out. So in order to understand the way Adderall works, we first need to understand the disorder that it treats. It's used for ADHD patients. ADHD is short for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It's a behavioral disorder characterized by impulsivity, hyperaction, and inattention. The cause, unfortunately, today is still unknown for the disorder, but researchers are linking it to genetics and also to pregnant mothers who abuse tobacco and alcohol. Let's see. The functions impaired by the disorder are not those that can be learned or exercised. So it's not like if you have a muscle and your muscle is weak or injured, if you exercise it, it gets bigger and it gets stronger. These are impairments of complex neural networks in the brain. So there's nothing that these patients can do. So that's why they have to be on these medications. The ADHD is commonly diagnosed in children around the age of 7. And the first symptoms that they see is just hyperactivity and impulsivity. If they have inattention, they don't notice that until they're like in elementary school. That's when they notice, when they're unable to focus in class. There's 3 subtypes of the disorder. The first one is predominantly hyperactive and impulsive. For each of the subtypes, you have to have 6 symptoms or more to be classified in that subtype. So if you were classified in predominantly hyperactive and impulsive, you would have 6 symptoms of that and less than 6 symptoms of inattention. The second one is just inattention, and these are the children that are usually they don't act out, they don't have hyperactive or impulsivity, they're just very inattentive, they just can't focus, they're usually quieter. And then the third subtype includes all 3, and this is the subtype that is the most common among children. So how Adderall works is we have dopamine in our neural networks. It's a neurotransmitter, and studies indicate that Adderall affects these catecholamine neurotransmitters in the brain, like dopamine and epinephrine, which activates certain sensory regions throughout your brain. It's believed that patients with ADHD have a deficiency in dopamine, and so that's why they're prescribed this medication. It first understimulates them for a few minutes, and then gradually it brings them back to a normal baseline. What Adderall does is it mimics these catecholamine neurotransmitters, and it releases a dopamine like normal people with their brain functioning without understimulation. This is what helps the Adderall ADHD patients release those same. It helps them release the neurotransmitters, which helps them come to the same baseline as a normal person would. It does it by mimicking them, and it binds to the receptor sites and releases chemicals which cause emotional responses like euphoria, alertness, and anxiety. Unfortunately, not only does Adderall release these catecholamines, but it inhibits the function of monoamine transporters, whose job is to remove it from the synapse to stop the signal in a process called reuptake. For example, when dopamine is released, it does its job by stimulating the other neuron, and it becomes recycled in order for it to be used again. Adderall blocks this process, not allowing the dopamine to be recycled, so it gets washed away, which results in less dopamine in each neuron, which then results in depression, because dopamine is the feel-good chemical in your brain. It's a reward-seeking chemical. So, next slide. This is a slide right here. And this one is your presynaptic neuron. The middle right here is the synapse, and then this is the postsynaptic neuron. These little C's are the catecholamines, like dopamine and epinephrine. The blocks of red are Adderall, and what it's doing, it's showing that once they're released out of these monoaminotransferters, the Adderall, they bind to these receptor sites right over here, and then it sends a nerve impulse, which creates the stimulation. The Adderall blocks it, so the dopamine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, they get stuck in the synapse and they get washed away. So instead of being recycled, you're losing that. So side effects, there's very common side effects like dry mouth, nervousness. Addiction is very common. It's not an uncommon side effect at all. Headache, uneven heartbeat, and anxiety. And then less common side effects are like high blood pressure and depression, paranoia. More serious side effects are the ones that you would need immediate medical attention for: personality changes, seizures, vomiting, dehydration, psychosis. Those are some things that you need to go and get immediate medical help right away. Let's see. So abuse, this is by far what I see on a daily basis, is students who self-diagnose themselves with ADHD. They find themselves daydreaming while doing homework just because they have lack of interest in the subject, or they automatically, because of that, they think that they have ADHD, but it's just that they're not interested in that subject maybe. So they feel like they need to get it, and unfortunately prescriptions, they're not very hard to get nowadays. So it becomes very popular among college students. Whether it's self-diagnosed or just an easy way to study because it helps you focus, it's very popular and it's very dangerous. According to the survey, according to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, 15% of college students have used some sort of the psychostimulant for non-medical use, and 7 of the 15 were using Adderall, and it was illegally. At the University of Kentucky, a study with 1,800 students was done, and 34% of the students admitted to using the drug illegally. So some myths that students they think to themselves or they hear from other students is that it's harmless because it's a prescription. If it wasn't harmless, it wouldn't be illegal. It would be illegal. But what they're not understanding is the reason why it's a prescription is because it's very harmless. It's addictive and it has a high risk of abuse. So if you're getting the prescription and you don't really have ADHD, it's still affecting you. It's mainly for the people that have the disorder. So it is. They don't feel bad about using it because it's legal and they feel it's morally acceptable, but forget that the Adderall, along with other Schedule II medications like oxycodone, Oxycontin, they're Schedule II medications for a reason, and it's because they have that high abuse potential. Selling, sharing, or transfer of the Schedule II medications without a license is illegal in Arizona. It's a Class 2 felony, which you could go to prison for, and then use of it without a prescription is a Class 4 penalty. Addiction also is, the students also think that it's not addictive because it's a prescription. They think that the only ones that are addictive are the cocaine and the drugs that are illegal. You're going to get arrested right away when you get caught for that. They think those are the only ones that are addictive, but most of these prescription drugs, that's why it's required for you to have a prescription, is because they are addictive. With that said, obviously, the last myth that they're going to use it temporarily, a lot of students feel that, I'm just going to use it to study for this final, or cram for this, do this paper really fast overnight, and then you start seeing that the results are good, so you keep using it and then you do get addicted to it. So some changes that I feel that could be made is Adderall should be dispersed by physicians sparingly, not so easily. And everyone, whether it's Adderall or any medication that you're taking, be aware of the risks and side effects the medications cause. It might change your mind and you might not want to take that medication any longer. And my last one is for students to not procrastinate, because I've noticed that the students who are usually taking the medication are waiting last minute to do these things. So if you have to manage your time better, you don't have to subject yourself to taking prescription medications to help you along the way. And any questions? Yes?
You You said it was for temporary use. What is temporary use considered if you have ADHD?
No. I meant it's temporary for people, students taking it. They feel like they're just going to take it temporarily, like to study for one exam or to, write a paper overnight. And then they see that, oh, maybe they were able to focus really well and the results are great, so they keep doing it and then they become addicted to it.
How long does it take someone to get used to, say, a milligram of the medicine?
Everybody is different. Everyone's body works differently. So it does build up a tolerance, which is another reason why it's dangerous. So say if you were prescribed a medication, a 15 milligram capsule, and you're taking it by 6 months maybe, you might build up a tolerance for that. So you're going to need maybe 20, 25 milligrams to do the same thing to you that the 15 milligrams was doing. Yes?
What are some possible treatments if someone found themselves addicted to Adderall?
Addicted to Adderall?
Yeah, what are some possible treatments if you find yourself addicted?
The treatments I'm assuming would be the same as any other addictive medication. Like even like methamphetamine, the addicts, they go through withdrawals. This is the same thing to your brain that methamphetamine does. And so you would most likely have to go through those withdrawals, maybe even go to rehab. You would definitely have to get some sort of help because it does the same thing. And there have been studies that show that equal doses of both they're not distinguished between patients. So it does the same thing to you. It's the release of those neurotransmitters and the blocking of the uptake process that's the problem.
Let's thank Rita.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Allison Hibner. Allie's going to talk about the effects of alcohol on prescription drugs. Please welcome Allie.
The 1,000 times I had Dr. Mancini say my name, I don't think I've ever heard him say Allison. Ever. I was like, who's coming up here? Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Allie Hibner, and I'm in Dr. Mancini's organic chemistry class. And today I'm here to talk to you about what happens when you mix prescription medications with alcohol. So, first let's explain how does alcohol affect the human body. So, contrary to what your beliefs might be, alcohol is found in nature. It's not just man-made. Almost every time that you eat a piece of fresh fruit, drink a glass of orange juice, or even eat freshly baked bread, the chances of you getting some sort of alcohol ingestion is pretty high. Okay. Certain animals, like birds, elephants, and chimps, have been known to seek out alcohol for its effects. That's not a joke. I was reading in my paper that elephants actually in Africa were breaking into breweries and stealing all of the alcohol. So the human liver also processes alcohol at about a ½ ounce per hour. That's equivalent to 6 beers, 5 ounces of wine, and 1 ounce of spirits. The rest leftover alcohol, because of course nobody just stops at that one beer, will end up in the bloodstream and travel straight to your heart. From there, it will relax the heart muscles and the blood vessels, in turn, decreasing blood pressure. From there, blood is less likely to clot, which increases your chance of heart attack and stroke, not something that we want to experience. Blood will also flow from the center of your body to your extremities, and that's why we see sometimes after a couple of alcoholic beverages, you can see some people start to get rosy cheeks. Alcohol also has a sedative property which slows your nerve impulses, makes you fuzzy thinking, and has rubbery muscles and blurry vision. So the big take-home idea here is that alcohol depresses your central nervous system, which can cause a respiratory arrest. So the last thing that we want to do is have you stop breathing. You're going to die. So here's an example of what happens when you drink alcohol in large quantities. Now let's go through some statistics on alcohol. 70% of the adult population consumes alcohol occasionally. 10% of the population drinks daily. And 99% of PVCC students and faculty drink 3 to 4 times daily. It's hard to get through OChem people. So here's an example of a guy who drinks so much beer, he made his house out of beer cans. Now let's go through the statistics on prescription medications. So there are more than 2,800 prescription medications in the United States. There's 2,000 over-the-counter drugs, which mean that you don't need a prescription to buy them. And 14 billion prescriptions are written annually by physicians. That's a lot of prescriptions. How many prescriptions and OTC drugs do you have in your medicine cabinet? So the data on both medications and alcohol suggests that concurrent use of alcohol and medications is inevitable. So, in turn, we need to make sure that when you mix alcohol and medications, you're very careful. It can cause severe side effects. So, let's explain how alcohol now interferes with these medications. So, the dose of the drug that reaches the site of action is called its availability. Certain enzymes are needed to metabolize that medication properly. So, if you're drinking alcohol, those specific enzymes that are meant to break down your medications are now being used to break down alcohol instead of that medication. So an acute dose of alcohol, a drink or two, competes with that same enzyme. This causes the drug not to metabolize and can quickly extend its durations of the harmful side effects of drugs. I'm sure we've all seen those pamphlets on every single drug you purchase that has 50,000 side effects. The last thing we want to do is have the duration even longer than what it would be. Now, on the flip side of this is a chronic long-term alcohol use. Activation of drug metabolizing enzymes by alcohol. This causes less availability of the medication because the enzymes are metabolizing the alcohol instead of metabolizing your drugs. Enzymes can transform some of the drugs into toxic chemicals that can damage your liver and other organs. So let's now go through some of the common medications. First we have morphine, diabetic medications, benzodiazepines, antihistamines, and cephalosporins. So let's start off first with alcohol and morphine. Now morphine, I'm not sure if you all understand what exactly morphine is on the drug class level. It's going to be far, far more potent than your normal over-the-counter drug like, say, Tylenol or Aleve, and far more even potent than Vicodin, a Schedule 3 medication. It's in the Schedule 2. And on most substances of morphine, most doses are even going to be more potent than, let's say, a Percocet. So, morphine is also a central nervous system depressant. And of course, as we just learned, so is alcohol. So, if we put 2 and 2 together, morphine and alcohol, we're going to have a severe central nervous system shutdown, which can cause you to stop breathing. Not a side effect that we want to go to. Now let's talk about alcohol and diabetic medications. So first, let's explain insulin. Most of you are pretty aware of the problem we have in the United States about type 2 diabetes. Basically what's happened is your insulin receptors become a little numb. So they're not going to be quite as efficient as somebody who doesn't have diabetes. So in turn, you have to take insulin, which is a synthetic form of sugar that you inject in, depending on how diabetic you are. And then in turn, metformin also has to be taken with the insulin concurrently. So, insulin and metformin can cause a diabetic coma through extreme hypoglycemia if you drink alcohol along with it. So, not to worry, there is a cure for hypoglycemia if you're testing your blood sugars. Donuts. Okay, now let's go through benzodiazepines, commonly known as your benzo drugs. They're going to be, I'm sure, what you've heard of as Valium, Xanax, and Ativan. Maybe you've heard of it as diazepam or alprazolam. They're mainly going to be used mostly, obviously there's a couple other, different things that it can be used for, but mostly it's going to be your anti-anxieties, excuse me. But if you take enough of it, it also will cause extreme drowsiness and you will fall asleep. So if we mix them together, it will cause a synergism of the central nervous system depression. Again, not something that we want to do. So if you mix too much alcohol, too many diazepams, you'll end up very calm, very sleepy, and very dead. Now let's move on to antihistamines. I'm sure you've all have probably experienced using an antihistamine, the wind kicks up and you have to take something. This isn't necessarily your Claritin or your Zyrtec. I'm going to talk to you about Benadryl. Benadryl can be used for that, but it does have a side effect of being sleepy, so it's not something that you'd want to take during the day. More likely you're going to take Benadryl because you're having an allergic reaction, either a rash or you're getting puffy, or you'll see, you're turning red. That's usually when you're going to take a Benadryl. So, usually it's made for allergic reactions. It also is a central nervous system depressant. So, it's going to lower your performance, it's going to increase your performance of your psychomotor. And once again, it's going to cause a synergistic CNS depression. So you basically end up stumbling around and stop breathing. And then lastly is your cephalosporins. Cephalosporins is your pretty broad range antibiotics. I'm sure you've heard of them as Keflex. It's going to be usually to treat gram-negative bacteria. These cephalosporins contain disulfiram that may inhibit aldehyde dehydrogenase, thereby leading to an accumulation of acetaldehyde, the metabolite of alcohol. This can lead to alcohol flush reaction, which has been associated with the high risk of esophageal cancer. Not something we want to get. So, in conclusion, mixing alcohol and medications, even common medications, can be deadly. So avoid death by the following instructions. If these medications say to avoid with this medication, pharmacists are not kidding. You have to follow directions. If you decide not to follow the directions, you will meet the following. Death. Where's a cute little bow? And I just want to thank all of my classmates who voted for me. That was so nice of you. I feel truly blessed to be up here. And the audience members, thank you so much for listening. And a special thank you to Dr. Mancini. He has been such a fabulous teacher. I don't think we would have gone through OChem without him. Thank you. Oh, do we have any questions? Of course we do. Okay, yes. In the back? Synergism just means that it's together, so if you're taking alcohol and that prescription medication together will cause an increased CNS depression. And central nervous system, so that's going to be depressed, which causes you to go into a cardiac arrest and you'll stop breathing. So, if you stop breathing, you die. That's something we want to do. Yes?
Can you go over what was the side effects of drinking with insulin? Other than eating a donut, I don't really see.
Well, the problem is when you drink alcohol, it raises your blood sugars. So if you're not testing your blood sugar at that same time, you could drink alcohol and be diabetic. You just need to be on top of your game if you're going to do that. If you keep it at the correct level that you're supposed to be at, it's dependent on how diabetic you are, so I can't really quite answer that. But as long as you keep it stable, you won't go into hypothermia. You won't go into shock from the insulin. But if you do, that's when you need to start downing sugar immediately. so that you don't die. Anything else? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Our third presenter of the afternoon is Isabel Santana. Electrical current in the heart. Let's welcome Isabel.
Good afternoon. My name is Isabel Santana, and I will be talking to you guys about electricity in the heart. But first, I want to ask you guys to raise your hand if you have a heart. So I hope everyone raised their hand. Okay, good. So you guys should listen because this is so important. So I'm going to tell you guys about how the heart beats, where the electricity comes from. What happens when where the electricity comes from stops working, about pacemakers, and your life after having implantation of a pacemaker. And then I will have a question and answer session. So what makes a heartbeat? So in our heart, we have specialized cells, and these cells are the ones that conduct an electrical current that tell our heart that it has to contract. Our heart needs to contract so we can have blood flowing so it can go to our organs and we can stay alive. So these specialized cells belong to a system called the cardiac conduction system. And we have 4. At the top of the atrium, here I'll show you a picture. At the top we have the SA node, and then the electricity flows from the SA node to the AV node, and then through the bundle of His to the bundle branches, and then to the Purkinje's fibers. So the SA node is the most important thing because it's the one that releases electricity the fastest. Every other cell also releases electricity, but they do it at a slower pace. And so the SA node is what controls the heart and the electricity. So inside of our cells, we have potassium in our heart, and it's negatively charged. And outside, in the membrane, we have sodium, which is positively charged. And this is when we are at rest. But when something triggers our cells, like for example, our heart needs to pump, what happens is that the gate, which is called the sodium-potassium gate, opens. So now you have negatively charged ions coming out, and then getting attracted to the positively charged side, and then we have vice versa, the positive going into the negative charge, and that creates electricity. So what happens when that doesn't happen? When the SA node starts producing that at a slower pace, we can have, it can cause arrhythmia. So arrhythmia is your heartbeat is irregular, so it can cause you to become it has many side effects. You become tired, you don't have as much, you can't be as much active, and I'll tell you about a way that we can help that. And then when the tissue dies in the heart, that's a heart attack. And then what happens is that the tissue doesn't allow the electricity current to continue and let the heart pump. So right here, this is a specific pacemaker, and this is what can help your heart beat at a constant rate. So how this is installed is they do an incision on your chest, and it has leads. And the lead is, it goes through the vein, and it attaches to the heart, and then the generator is what sends the electric current. So the doctor sets a minimum of heartbeats. So your heart has to beat a certain amount, it's a minimum. So whenever your heart starts beating less than the minimum, then it sends a voltage pulse to your heart. The procedure takes approximately 30 to 60 minutes. And then your lifestyle is so much better. People say, or doctors say, you can live much longer because obviously when your heart doesn't work, it's not working properly, you're not pumping enough blood, and the blood goes to your organs, so it affects all your other organs, not just your heart. You'll be happier, you won't be tired, you'll be able to be more active, healthier, and the problem with these pacemakers is that if you pass through magnetic fields, it can disable the minimum that the doctor set it as, so you should avoid it. And that's why it's important to have your identification card, because that tells if something goes wrong, they know that you have a pacemaker, and they can do the procedure, help you out better. It cannot be damaged by household appliances such as a microwave or anything that you plug in. And then pacemakers have helped millions of people improve their quality of life. And we have an example, Dr. Mancini, not too long ago, he got a pacemaker, and after talking to him, he's told me how his life is much, much better. He's not as tired as before. He feels more active, and he's making Dr. D work harder. So I talked to you guys about the heartbeat, what makes the heartbeat, the electricity, where it comes from, what happens when that stops working, how pacemakers can help your heart beat at a regular pace, and how much better your life is. So, any questions or comments?
Got one.
Okay.
How strong of a magnetic field could mess up the pacemaker? Like, for example, airport scanners?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, if you go to the airport, you have to show them your identification card so they know, and then they can do a different procedure to check you, and Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
As Isabel said, in January I chose to get a pacemaker implanted. Prior to that, my resting pulse was 40, not sleeping pulse, resting pulse. And for the last 3 years, I've been fatigued every afternoon. I can tell you that since this device was implanted in me, my quality of life has improved. I'm not tired in the afternoon. My students aren't happy that I have this much extra energy. Even my wife said, oh my God, he's got more energy. So no, pacemakers are fabulous. So. Next, we're going to hear about parabens, the damaging preservative found in everything from food to cosmetics. Please welcome Kara Kronemeyer.
Hi, everyone. One second while I set up the PowerPoint. So my name is Kara Kronemeyer. I am actually a student in Professor Mancini's organic chemistry class. Today I will be going over with you the topic of parabens and the damaging effects that they have on your body. From this presentation, I hope that you will discover what parabens are,
the effects that they have on your body, and how to locate them in your everyday products that you use. With this, I hope you gain enough understanding in order to determine if parabens is something that you choose to eliminate from your daily lives. So first question, what are parabens? Essentially, parabens are a type of preservative used as an antimicrobial in cosmetics, including lotions, mascara, and even mouthwashes. The term paraben itself is derived from its molecular name, which is paraben hydroxybenzoic acid. There are several different types of parabens that exist. However, there are 5 that are most commonly used in products today. These 5 are called methylparaben, ethylparaben, propylparaben, butylparaben, and benzoparaben. Out of these 5, methylparaben and ethylparaben are the most common. So a little history on parabens. Parabens were first discovered in 1924 by a man named T. Shavatsky. In this discovery, he found the preserving properties and antimicrobial benefits that they had. It was not until the 1930s, however, that parabens were first used as preservatives in products. Since then, they have been used in cosmetics and pharmaceuticals because they have the ability to increase the preservation from 2 days to 2 years longer than they normally would last. In 1995, parabens were added to the generally regarded as safe list by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Generally speaking, once a product or chemical is added to this list, the FDA does not look further into the effects that a chemical might potentially have. However, because of the concerns brought to the attention of the government, first by researchers and then by the public, the safety assessment of parabens was reopened in 2005 by the Cosmetic Ingredient Review. The 5 main structures that are most commonly used, I mentioned earlier, they're methylparaben, ethylparaben, propylparaben, butylparaben, and benzoparaben. As you can see, the name itself is from the substituents that they have: methyl, ethyl, propyl, butyl, and benzyl. Chain length also determines the solubility of the paraben. Parabens with longer chains tend to be more soluble in oil, while shorter chains are more soluble in water. Because of the longer chains' increased solubility in oil, it also makes it better absorbed into the epidermis layer of the skin. This means that products that are oil-based, such as makeup, will tend to do better in early cosmetics. Because of a longer chain's increased solubility, I apologize, sorry. However, since methyl and ethylparaben are easier to come by than the longer chain parabens, they are still highly used in even oil-based products. Because these parabens are insoluble in oil, more methylparabens are needed to make sure the product is preserved and maintained. Consequently, this means that more and more parabens are applied topically to a person's skin. Before more research was done, parabens were thought to be minimally absorbed into our systems, metabolized by our liver and kidneys. However, due to recent studies, it was discovered that main components of the paraben structure do in fact get absorbed into our tissues and bodily fluids. Also in 2004, it was discovered that out of 20 people that had breast cancerous tumors, 19 of them had extremely high amounts of parabens existing in their tumor. A lot of problems arise because parabens are xenoestrogens, which means that they are synthetically made chemicals that mimic the behavior of estrogen in the body. Extra estrogen can be unhealthy to a human body. It can cause diminished muscle mass, extra fat storage, and male breast growth. Negative effects connected to parabens. There are several health concerns that are connected to the use of parabens in products. One of them that has increased over the past few decades, though it's still kind of rare, is that more and more people are becoming allergic to parabens. This is more commonly seen with facial products and other things that are applied topically. Allergic reaction also tends to increase in people that have open lesions on their skin, such as leg ulcers. Parabens also have the tendency to affect the endocrine system, which is the system that secretes hormones into the body. Since parabens have the tendency to behave like estrogen, it is considered an endocrine disruptor. Not only do parabens affect estrogen levels, however, They also affect testosterone and can lower sperm count in males. As discussed previously, parabens are potentially linked to be cancer-causing. Though only 19 out of the 20 people with breast tumors had excessive amounts of parabens, the other one did have some parabens existing in the tumor as well. This table shows a general conclusion of the effect that parabens have on certain systems in our body. As can be seen, parabens definitely do affect the endocrine system, and it has the potential to affect our immune systems and can be cancer-causing as well. Regulation in the U.S. and other countries. In the United States, the Food and Drug Administration does not get involved in the regulation of products. In fact, the only time that the government does get involved is when products become contaminated. Because of this, the usage of parabens is actually advantageous to manufacturers so that products do not spoil faster. Even though the initial research done on the 20 people with cancerous breast tumors was done in England, the government does not believe that there's enough evidence to prove the negative effects of parabens. In Australia, it's actually one of the only countries that have any sort of regulations on parabens, and even then it's only on certain products such as deodorants and antiperspirants. Also, in 1974, Australia passed a law that states that an ingredient list must be listed in order from greatest to least, so that people are able to recognize the main ingredients in the products. Overall, more research will need to be done to provide governments with the necessary research that they need to begin regulating preservatives in products. So what needs to be done? One of the most necessary things that needs to be done in order for parabens to be looked at and regulated by the governments more is obviously more research. The one study that was done was with the 20 people with the breast cancerous tumors. However, there's many things that were not taken into account with this study. One being that there was only 20 people, which is a very small amount to offer good results. Also, healthy people without tumors were not looked at, providing the control group for the study. Though there is definitely not enough research done to show that parabens cause cancer, there is definitely a decent amount of research available that shows parabens do affect the endocrine system in humans. So products that contain parabens versus products that do not contain parabens. These are just your general household items that most of you probably have. Products that contain parabens, Crest Pro Health mouthwash, Dove body wash, Almay mascara, and L'Oreal softening powder. Then there's products that do not contain parabens, and they're actually advertised as such. It's the brand Yes to Carrots, Yes to Blueberries, and Yes to Cucumbers. Also, Burt's Bees does not have any parabens in it. And then also anything that states that it's paraben-free does not contain parabens. So what do parabens look like on an ingredient list? As you can see below, the parabens are actually clearly circled and they're labeled paraben, even if you don't remember like ethyl and methylparaben and all that scientific terms or whatnot. If you know the term paraben, you can just look through the ingredient list and see if there's any parabens in the product. So what can you do? The first thing is to start recognizing parabens in the products that you use, which I previously showed you how to do. Eliminating parabens is also becoming easier to do since more and more cosmetic companies are creating products that are natural or paraben-free. By doing this, you will reduce the amount of xenoestrogens that are absorbed into your body and decrease the risk for any health issues that may be caused or related to the usage of parabens. From this presentation, I hope that you guys have a better understanding of what parabens are and how they affect your body and determine if that's something that you'd like to eliminate from your daily lives. Questions? John?
Even though it is on the generally recognized as safe list, there's no safe exposure level for benzene. So that's something I just wanted to point out.
Also a comment? Okay. Thank you. Any more?
So because excessive paraben poses
Yeah.
can lead to kind of nasty side effects, so to say. The much disputed topic of cosmetic testing on animals, is that also an effect to attempt to
there's companies that test on animals, obviously, and the products that they have do contain parabens. However, I think it's more they're looking at people that are ourselves, because we do have a massive amount of parabens in. All of us have been exposed to parabens since early childhood and even before that. So I think it's probably going to be something more that they will look at people that are not regulating paraben usage in their lives versus people that are, because that's really the only way to be able to notice the difference between the two people. Any other questions? Someone was raising their hand back there.
Oh, I was just wondering, it's based on the hormones that you talked about, disruptors. Is there anything that correlates to thyroid disorder?
I'm not sure. It's more done on, it's been more seen to be estrogen disrupting, and testosterone, of course, so more like the female and male hormones. It definitely could affect that, and it has been linked to like immune disorders, which thyroid is connected to that. However, more research obviously will need to be done, so hopefully they'll look into that.
Moving along, electrical stimulation in physical therapy, presented by Brittany Bradbury. Let's welcome Brittany.
I'm kind of tall, so I have to adjust. Okay, so as Dr. Mancini said, I will be presenting today about electrical stimulation and physical therapy. More specifically, I will be talking to you about what electrical stimulation is and what it's used for, the history of electrical stimulation, the components that go into making an electrical stimulation machine, the basic physics and principles of electricity, the types of currents used in electrical stimulation, the types of electrical stimulation used, and how the current moves through the body. So, what electrical stimulation is and what it's used for. Electrical stimulation is a rehabilitation modality with a wide range of clinical applications. These applications include, but are not limited to, the resolution of edema and contusions, so getting rid of swelling and bruising, to increase tissue blood flow to allow the affected area to heal more quickly, to destroy bacteria, to strengthen muscles, for pain control, and also to exercise the muscles of paralyzed individuals. So there are many individuals who contributed to the development of electrical stimulation. These individuals do consist of Galvani, who in 1791 recorded muscle contractions on a frog's leg when he put the leg in contact with metal. Volta constructed a precursor to a battery, which he then called the galvanic current. Duchenne mapped out locations on the skin where electrical stimulation can cause the muscles to contract, which he called motor points. Faraday in 1830s discovered a magnet when a magnet induces a bidirectional current, which he then termed Faraday current. Also, Lepic in 1905 developed the law of excitation, which is a relationship between intensity and duration of a stimulus, which then became determining on whether or not the muscle would be able to contract. Morrow and Black discovered a device that could control the duration and repetition of volley of a current delivered to the tissue and under observation. So the duration would be how long the stimulation would go, and the repetition would be how fast or how many times during that duration it would continue. And then lastly, Melzack and Wall developed a gate control theory of pain perception, which stated that electrical currents can control the severity of your pain. And also here are the many individuals who contributed to the development. So here's Galvani and Volta, Duchenne, Faraday, Lepic, Morrow, Black, Melzack, and Wall. So during Morrow and Black's device that they found to control the duration and repetition of the stimulus, that was actually the first electronic circuit for an electrical stimulation machine, and that was all the way back in 1948. So electrical stimulation has been around for a very long time. It had three main components, which were the gating, the pacemaker tubes, and a univibrator. The univibrator is what generates the pulses of the current, so which makes it turn on and turn off, and that's what you feel when you receive electrical stimulation. The gating is a cathode tube, which operates in a cutoff condition, and the gating operates by using the energy from the univibrator. And then the pacemaker tubes determine the rate at which the univibrator pulses. These components can easily be modified to any individual depending on the severity or the severity of their condition. So next are basic physics and principles of electricity. So electricity, as you probably all know, is a force that's created by an imbalance of the number of electrons between 2 points or poles. These 2 points and poles are the cathode and the anode. The cathode is in an area where there's a high electron concentration, and the anode is where there's an area of low electron concentration. Basically, there are two circuits that electricity can be conducted through. There's an open circuit, which is a complete path between the cathode and the anode, allowing electrons to flow. And there's an open circuit, which is an interrupted or an incomplete path that blocks normal electron flow. Okay, there are also three main types of currents used in electrical stimulation. There are direct currents, which are known as DC circuits, alternating current, which is AC, and then there are pulse currents. So there's one type of direct current, which is a unidirectional, uninterrupted flow of electrons that travels from cathode to anode. Direct currents use the galvanic current 99% of the time, and an example of a direct current would be iontophoresis, which I will discuss later in my presentation. The second type is alternating current. It is a bidirectional, uninterrupted shuffle back and forth between electrodes. So the electrodes have to alternate between being positive and negative instead of having a set cathode and anode. And an example of this would be interferential stimulation. Thirdly, we have pulse currents. Pulse currents have three different subclasses. There is monophasic, biphasic, and asymmetrical. So starting with monophasic, monophasic is a unidirectional current that has periods of non-current flow. So basically it will pulse on and off. This current stays on one side of the baseline, so instead of continuing and then stopping, it will be very intense and then get lower and then become intense again, but always constantly having a current. Biphasic is a symmetrical mirror image with positive and negative charges and has equal current flow. So it will become very intense and then it will completely stop, and then it will become very intense and completely stop and keep going for the duration. And asymmetrical has two phases that don't mirror each other. So there are two different types of asymmetrical current. There's balanced and unbalanced. Balanced current is an equal electrical charge that allows for greater anodal and cathodal effect, and overall there is no net charge. So once again, it will be very intense in the positive direction, and then it will stop the same amount for that same amount of time. So over the course of time, your area that's affected won't have any electrical charge. And then there's unbalanced versus unequal charge. So over time there is a net charge. So you can have a greater positive current and a lesser negative current. And then the next time it will be a lower positive current, but a greater negative current. So those don't ever equal each other. And here are examples of direct current of their wave patterns. So direct current stays above on one baseline, whether it be positive or negative, and stays constant that entire time. Alternating current is an equal current that has the same positive and same negative. Down here is monophasic. So it stays above one side of the baseline, but has the same positive and negative effect. And then biphasic is a mirror image, just flipped. So whatever happens on the positive side also happens on the negative side. And then here is balanced and unbalanced. So balanced has the same, over time, this picture doesn't really look symmetrical, but over time it will even out. So then there are 4 different main types of electrical stimulation. There is rushing current electrical stimulation, which pulses on and off for the duration of the stimulation. Rushing current stimulation is beneficial for muscle strengthening. Second, we have inferential current stimulation, which you apply 2 pairs of electrodes, which is 4 electrodes total, and you diagonally place them from each other, and they stimulate the muscle with an interference effect on the targeted area. So as you can see here in the picture, they use the 4 electrodes, and they put the one and the one opposite from each other. So what happens when the current starts coming in, it'll come in from the ones and hit in a point, but then instead of stopping, the 2s will come in and hit it opposite. So it keeps coming in and it creates a pinpoint on the affected area. The third is transcutaneous electrical nerve stimulation. This has been used since the 1950s, and it was the first stimulation that produced the depth-efficient stimulation of nerve and muscle. Most of the other stimulations only affect either nerve or muscle. They didn't affect both. So transcutaneous electrical stimulation was kind of the first big thing that got all of it done in one stimulation. It's also known as a TENS unit. So anybody who's been through physical therapy, you probably have had a TENS unit hooked on you. And then lastly, iontophoresis. This is a type of stimulation that administers medication through the electrodes. It uses 2 electrodes. One administers the medicine, and the other absorbs the particles that are not absorbed into your tissues. As the picture is small. But as you can see here, you have your anode and your cathode, and you also have a battery that connects it. The battery is what creates the charge to move the medicine particles through your tissues and then absorb whatever is not soaked into your tissues. So then that brings us to the topic of how the current actually moves through your body. Electrical stimulation can stimulate excitable cells that consist of nerves, muscle fibers, cell membranes, but it cannot stimulate the non-excitable cells, which can be found in bone, cartilage, tendons, adipose tissue, and ligaments. So excitable cells consist of 70 to 75% water, which makes it very good conductors for electricity. So then once the current enters through the skin, which is a series circuit, because it is a continuous all over your body, it doesn't, vary on the part of your body. It goes into the excitable cells, and the current goes through the parallel circuit, going deeper and deeper into the layers of muscle and nerve and blood. And then the path, which is the path of least resistance for the current, it just keeps going through whatever it can get through to help promote healing. So how the current goes through into the body is that it uses electrodes, which introduce the current to the body and are connected to the generator. And the generator is the big machine that you can control. So the electrode leads connect the generator to the electrodes, which goes then onto the patient. A closed circuit is needed to have productive stimulation. So the electrodes need to be firmly attached to the patient. If any of them are loose, you won't get the full stimulation, so you won't get the full current, and it won't be as productive. Also, the most used electrodes by
May I have your attention, please?
No?
Everything's okay, everything's all clear. You're working on the system. Everybody go back to work.
little icebreaker there. Okay, so the carbon rubber electrodes are the most commonly used because they deliver the current at the lowest impedance, which is about 200 ohms. And it sounds like a lot, but it's really not. And that allows for the most comfortable stimulation. So by show of hands, would you rather have metal electrodes hooked on you or like a very soft rubber
Those in favor for metal? Always a select few. And then for like rubber. Generally, that's the vote. Alright, so then all in conclusion, electrical stimulation is closely related to physics that's supported by the history, the circuit mechanism, the type of circuits used, the types of stimulation, and the effects of current through the body. That's it. And does anybody have any questions? Yeah.
Would using a therapy like that, if you were in a position where you had a pacemaker, would that interfere?
It would. It depends where on your body the stimulation would be, and it depends how severe or how many volts you would need to receive the proper stimulation. Some people have a higher pain tolerance, so if you were performing stimulation on a 70-year-old woman, you would have to use a lower voltage because her skin would be thinner, so it would go through faster and she would feel the pain more, opposed to 19-year-old guy who works out every day. It would take more to get through to his muscles. So, yes.
There's a very interesting book written by Dr. Tennant who developed the laser corneal surgery, and the book is called Healing is Voltage, and it's similar to this, but it ties together chi and pH and all kinds of cellular electricity. This is very good.
Interesting, thank you. Anybody else? Nope. Okay.
The next presenter is Reva Israel. She will talk about stem cells, a medical breakthrough in fighting debilitating diseases and reversing aging. Let's welcome Reva.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Reba, and I'm going to be speaking to you about stem cells. So I'm going to be speaking about what stem cells are, the Stem Cell Research Enhancement Act, the different types of stem cells, how they're used to cure diseases, as well as reverse aging, because we all want to stay young forever. Okay, so what are stem cells? Stem cells are cells that have the potential to develop into different types of cells in your body. They serve as an internal repair system, so if a tissue is damaged, a cell can repair itself. And once the cells divide, they have a potential to remain as a stem cell or become a cell with a more specialized function, such as a red blood cell or a brain cell. And in some organs, such as bone marrow, cells can divide regularly to replace the damaged tissues, and then in other organs, such as the pancreas or the heart, the cells can only divide under special conditions. So the Stem Cell Research Enhancement Act was passed in 2009 by George W. Bush, and it basically just allowed funding for stem cell research. And the aim was to find cures for diseases such as Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's, cancer, spinal cord injuries, and that's one of the scientists' main goals. There was like a controversy about stem cells as to how to derive the stem cells without harming a living embryo, and they came up with an option called oocyte-assisted reprogramming,
which is pretty much like the somatic cells, which are adult stem cells, would be altered before being transformed into the nucleus to form a pluripotent rather than an embryo. And those who supported the Enhancement Act were looking at it more from a scientific perspective rather than an ethical one. Keep pressing the wrong button. Okay, so there's two types of stem cells. There are embryonic stem cells and non-embryonic stem cells, which are known as somatic cells or adult stem cells. And the image shown is a colored screening of embryonic stem cells. So they came up with this in 1981 when they discovered a way to derive embryonic stem cells from mice. And it led to methods to derive cells from human embryos, and they use these for reproductive purposes, such as in vitro fertilization. Once they didn't really have a purpose for the cells anymore, they just used it for research studies. So induced pluripotent stem cells are adult stem cells that have been genetically reprogrammed to an embryonic stem cell-like state. And in 2007, scientists later discovered a way to genetically reprogram stem cells to assume a stem cell-like state. They have been derived from human embryos that are just a few days old, and this is important because the cells in the embryos are needed to be able to repair damaged tissues. And these cells are reprogrammed to meet the certain requirements for each cell in the body. Okay, so the human body is made up of trillion stem cells, or 2,000 of those types are stem cells, sorry. Somatic cells have the ability to generate to any cell type in the body. And unlike embryonic stem cells, adult stem cells used in research are not controversial because they're derived from tissues rather than human embryos. And scientists are able to see how stem cells can prevent and treat diseases in the body by implanting in particular diseases in the laboratory. And once the stem cells are cloned, they are implanted in the body, and the cell can identify major injuries in the immune system and fix it. The stem cell also identifies other injuries and transform into that cell type, particular to the tissue. But if the cells are not cloned, then the body sees it as a foreign object and it destroys it. And scientists believe that stem cells are the new breakthrough to improve the survival rate of life-threatening diseases in the future. And as you can see, compared to 1960, in 2003, with the use of bone marrow and stem cells, the survival rate has increased. One of the most vital medical breakthrough would be trying to create a large organ that can be used for humans because of the wait list for organ donors are so high. They have actually been able to create a few miniature livers. There was this research team in Great Britain who used stem cells from the umbilical cord to grow a human liver, and they gathered the blood cells and stimulated the cells to help multiply quickly. And the team just added some hormones and chemicals and transformed the cells into liver cells. And they ended up creating several tiny livers. So to me, that would be a great thing. Instead of we can eliminate the long wait list for organ donors. So there's just as embryos develop into adult humans with a variety of specialized cells, human embryonic stem cells can be developed into any healthy tissue and be transplanted into people suffering from aging and age-related diseases. According to Life Extension, IPS do not work as well as human embryonic stem cells in stimulating the production of telomerase. Telomerase is an enzyme that maintains the healthy cells by keeping the length of the telomeres intact. And these are images of telomeres, and the bright yellow at the end is what it actually is. They're found at the end of the chromosomes, and once the cells divide, it loses some of its units that make up the telomeres, and causing the telomeres to shorten, and eventually the cells die. Dr. Michael West he is the chief executive of Biotime, and he's actually presented evidence of how to restore shortened telomeres so that it restores the young tissues. So Biotime scientists have measured the lifespan of 5 H stem cells that have been returned to embryonic states using transcriptional reprogramming. These lifespans exceeding the life expectancy of an original H cell. This provided the first definitive evidence that such technologies provide a means of manufacturing young cells genetically identical to cells of an H patient. That's quoted by Dr. West. And actually $2 million was donated to Biotime to be able to do more research in finding a cure for like age-related diseases, as well as just keeping us young, I guess. So there's, this is my favorite topic, it's the stem cell facelift. And it's a procedure that restores the shape of the face, as well as blending color irregularities caused by aging process and environmental sun exposure. Dr. Jem Papa is the founder of the worldwide patent stem cell facelift. It's a non-surgical procedure, and you don't need to get regular treatment, just like because Botox, you have to keep going in and get more Botox and stuff, and you don't need that for this. And basically, it takes cells from the lower abdominal and the thigh area, and they're stimulated and injected into 3 layers of your face. And yeah, so I have some like before and afters, which is like really interesting. So over here, it looks like that's before her surgery, and then it's after her surgery, and she didn't have previous like facelifts or anything like that. And this lady, she got the G-string under her chin done, and a little bit of her cheeks, as well as her lifting her eyelids. And this is a year after her surgery. That's what it looks like. And then there's this lady who got the tip of her nose done, as well as her lower chin and her cheeks, and as well as a brow lift too. And these are just like, that was a year after. So I'd like to end my presentation with a quote by David Christensen, who's the author of Patients, Not Politics. Living, breathing people who have been treated by stem cells, some who would have otherwise died, are signs of great hope of stem cell research. Thank you. Any questions? Yes?
So were those pictures from surgeries, or were they from the stem cells?
Those are from stem cells. They didn't have previous facelifts or anything like that. Any other questions? John?
Rita, Suzanne Summers was on TV today. She actually is a breast cancer survivor, and she had her right breast regrown with stem cells. So
Yeah.
very timely.
Yeah, they have been doing like the craziest things with it, and it's like amazing to me. Science is growing, guys. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Last but not least, Jill Berger is going to speak to you about scorpion, menace, or miracle. Let's welcome Jill.
I'm going to start with a little background on scorpions. They've been on this planet for more than 400 million years. They started initially as sea creatures. And then at about 340 million years ago, they came onto land. They're actually considered by some to possibly be the oldest living land animal in existence today. There's probably some older ones, but they're extinct now. They've also done very little changing evolutionary, which makes them a really interesting thing. And you can see from the fossils that modern day scorpions look a whole lot like the fossils from millions of years ago. Let's see. There's approximately 1,500 species of scorpions found throughout the world today. There's at least 200 other species that are now extinct, and new species are being found regularly. They can live in almost every habitat, not water anymore, but anything from deserts to tropical rainforests. There's even some scorpions that have been found in the snow-covered mountains of the Himalayas at about 14,000 feet. They're super hardy. They can survive days fully submerged in water, weeks of freezing, and up to 2 years without food or water. They do drink, but they can actually get all the water they need from the prey that they kill. And oftentimes it's not unusual for them to eat a meal and dig in the ground and stay there for 6 months and not come back out again. Okay. Originally, size-wise, when scorpions were sea creatures, they were in the 6 to 8 foot range. Fortunately, they are not that anymore. Today, scorpions range in size from 1 centimeter to 21 centimeters, which is roughly a little over 8 inches. They are arthropods, which means that they're invertebrates with an exoskeleton. And they're actually in the class arachnids, so they have 8 legs. They're related to spiders far more so than insects. One of the there's a few key elements, but it's their pedipalps, which are their big claws, and they have a segmented abdomen. The last 5 segments make up what most people consider a tail. And at the very end is their stinger, which is called a telson, and within it is the venom sacs, and it's tipped with a barb that gets used in a very hypodermic needle-like function. Another cool thing about scorpions, you can't really see it in this, but I made sure to put an image later, is they have these little hairy comb-like things called pectins on the underside, and they're sensory organs. So as they brush along the ground, they can sense prey if they're nearby, as well as they are chemoreceptors for pheromones for potential mates. So venom's used by scorpions in multiple ways. One is it's used for mating. Scorpions actually grab each other's little claws and do some weird funky mating dance. And they kind of like run in circles. It's really interesting. And then sometimes the male in certain species actually stings the female to sort of subdue her a little bit. And then basically, just because it's kind of interesting, the male puts the sperm on the ground and drags the girl through it. And then, an even more important aspect is, if the male doesn't get the heck out of Dodge, he might accidentally decide to eat the female. So it's similar to black widows, but it's the opposite. So another way that they use their venom is for prey if needed. They first always try and rely on their pinchers, and only, especially for scorpions that have little small pinchers, they will then subdue the prey if absolutely necessary.
but it leaves them defenseless because of the fact that if they can control how much venom they inject, but if they inject all of it, it can take up to 2 weeks to regenerate their venom. So they really ideally try not to use it for food purposes. One thing I put on this slide just because I thought it was pretty cool. So you can see the one scorpion in the blue. He's actually eating another scorpion. They are cannibalistic. So they tend to feed mostly on small insects, other scorpions, and larger scorpions can actually sometimes feed on small vertebrates like mice. And a really cool element of scorpions is that they're nocturnal, but they also glow with UV light. So it's a nice way to watch for scorpions. Out of the 1,500 species of scorpions, there's only approximately 25 species that are considered dangerous to humans. Only one of those species is in the United States, and it's found primarily in Arizona. It was originally only in Arizona, but now they've migrated into California. And that would be the Arizona bark scorpion. I'm hoping in this picture you can kind of see the little hair things. Hang on. Right in the very beak. Those are those sensory organs that mainly only scorpions have. So the Arizona bark scorpion is roughly about 2 centimeters, can be up to 2.5 and smaller. Scorpions also, another thing I added in here, they lay their baby, when they have their babies, they're not eggs, they're actually live, but they're not fully developed. So they all go hop on mom's back and finish developing for about 2 to 3 weeks. And then they go off on their own. And it's really that they're waiting to develop their final exoskeleton, and so until that's developed, they don't glow. So you can see the UV light with the moms and the little not glowing babies. Another interesting thing about these particular scorpions found in Arizona is they're climbers. So it's not enough just to watch the ground, you do have to watch the walls and the trees above you. That's actually how a number of people get stung in Arizona, because they don't realize that they have to look up, not just down. Okay, another thing is, on all the scorpions that are considered other than one variety that's found only in Iran and Iraq that are considered dangerous to humans, they are in the same family and they're distinguished by having a triangle-shaped sternum. But there's actually a much better way to figure out if the scorpion is going to be very dangerous to you, rather than flipping it over and trying to determine the shape of its sternum, which is the size of the claws. Basically, how dangerous scorpions are tends to have to do with the size of the claws. If the claws are really big, then they don't need to use their venom very much, so they're probably not overly potent. But if the claws are very small, then they do have to rely on the venom in order to defend themselves and to subdue prey. But there's an interesting catch to this, which is how venomous a scorpion is going to be still depends on how much venom they can inject. So little scorpions, which tend to have smaller pinchers and are more venomous, don't have a lot of venom, therefore they're not going to end up that dangerous to humans. All scorpions are toxic to insects, but with a body weight size ratio, most humans are not in bad shape. The only real people in danger of scorpion envenomations are going to be small children, infants, mainly kids under 5, and then people that are already immunocompromised or have high blood pressure, things that would put them in general danger. Or of course, if you happen to be allergic to scorpion venom, very similar to bee venom, it can kill you or put you in anaphylactic shock pretty quickly if that's the case. So I wanted to make sure there's a couple of venom reaction photos. The first one is the Arizona scorpion. Most people are going to get a lot of redness, very little swelling in reality, but you might feel kind of sick for a couple of days. anywhere from 1 to 3 days on the more potent scorpions. The first two are small scorpions that are considered dangerous, and the last one, I don't know how well you can see it up there, but it actually has the largest reaction, and it's not an overly potent venom, but it's a very large scorpion, so odds are he got a lot bigger dose. What the venom contains is a variety of toxins. The most dangerous and most well-researched is the neurotoxin, as well as other components and a few components that have evolved purely for defensive purposes. And those would be ones that cause pain, swelling, inflammation, which are going to be histamine and serotonin. One interesting note on serotonin is sometimes when women in their first trimester of pregnancy are bit by or stung by scorpions, they actually have miscarriages, and they think it's due to the serotonin. So on to the neurotoxin. Neurotoxins are toxins, which is poison, that target the neurosystem, more specifically the neurons, which are voltage dependent. They're excitable cells that get activated by the voltage dependent ion channels. And most neurotoxins in scorpions are affected by the sodium-potassium channels. They tend to hold them open, which causes repetitive firing, and that then goes into a cascade effect throughout our body. So the interesting thing is, it's not actually the scorpion venom itself that causes the worst of the reactions. It's sort of the spirals effect that our body's own communication system sort of starts fighting. Most people aren't going to get enough of a neurotoxin to do this, but a small child easily could. So these neurotoxins have been highly researched, and especially due to their specificity. Through evolution, even though the look and feel of scorpions has not changed much, the thing that has evolved are their venoms. They have developed ways to be extremely specific to certain ion channels and even certain creatures. So some aspects of venom only target insects. In fact, some aspects only target certain insects. So there's a lot of research being done for natural pesticides that might be able to get rid of actual pests but not harm bees and other types of insects that do beneficial things. It's also being used for alternative painkiller research because they actually have found that not only are some specific to mammals, but they're specific to exact ion channels. And so by isolating the ones that cause pain, they're potentially able to come up with a non-addictive painkiller. And both these areas of research are being worked on right now. The majority of the research is being done with the Death Stalker scorpion. This is the most potent scorpion in the world. It is found in North Africa to the Middle East, and it contains a powerful cocktail of neurotoxins, including chlorotoxin. Chlorotoxin, which is a very interesting neurotoxin because unlike most of them that affect sodium channels, this actually affects the calcium-activated chlorine channels. And something very important is that these channels are overexpressed on a lot of tumors, including gliomas, which are brain cancer, but they've also found they're overexpressed on people with different types of leukemia and breast cancer. So this is some of the research being done actually currently at Washington University, where they found that by tying these this CTX, this chlorotoxin, to iron oxide nanoparticles, it will go and seek out these particular cancer cells. It can even make it through the blood-brain barrier, which is really unusual, and it will bind to these MMP2 proteins on the surface of the cells. When it does, it pulls the proteins in along with it. Not only is it able to deliver exact medication per se, and they actually attack and kill the cancer cells. But it's these MM2 proteins that cause the cancers to be able to eat around the matrices, around the outside, and allow the cancer to spread. So it effectively is being able to stop the spread of cancer, as well as targeting to kill the cells. There's another group doing similar research where they're actually, instead of binding it to iron oxide, they are binding this chlorotoxin to radioactive ion particles. And they're being able to deliver chemotherapy directly to the cancer tumor cells because these don't seem to have any effect or care at all about normal cells. So people that would normally have to just get dosed with radiation and hope it manages to kill the right cells before it kills all the wrong ones are being able to have treatment put straight into their cancerous cells. And they're also tagging in with a type of, because of their radioactive, they can actually see on MRIs and other scans the cells being destroyed. And they had one study done at Cedars-Sinai Hospital, had one patient by the end of the first treatment 2 weeks later, no signs of the cancer whatsoever. The unfortunate thing is a lot of this research is being delayed right now because of funding in the current economy. So there's some other key research being done into areas such as secretory diseases. Cystic fibrosis is caused by mutated CFTR proteins, and our body's defense system, or I guess the things that mark it for destruction, the chaperone proteins, will go in and mark these proteins, and so they just get destroyed. These proteins are critical in order to have water be able to flow into the airways, which thins out mucus. So by sending in a different neurotoxin, but still from the same death stalker scorpion, they're being able to find that it will bind to these channels, and therefore the proteins can't get destroyed. They're still mutated, but they act about 50%, they get about 50% of the usage, which means these patients that have no water are able to get about 50% and live much more comfortable lives. So there's a lot of research being done in that, as well as it can treat the opposite. They're trying to figure out if it could treat the opposite kind of secretory, like cholera or other types of diseases where they uncontrollable diarrhea. So they maybe can stop the flow as well. There's also work being done into autoimmune because there's a type of toxin that can target and prevent T cells from forming. So hopefully organ transplants in patients with such as lupus. And there's being done on bone loss. And of course there's the anti-venom research. Anti-venom only recently was approved in this country, but there's a bad little catch to that. This anti-venom for the type of scorpions that we have here has been available in Mexico for like 10 years, and it costs about $100. Here, it costs, and it's $100 per unit, and you need about 3 units. Well, they've upmarked it to $3,500, and then because they need to pay for their research, and then hospitals are upmarking it to upwards of $12,000 a unit. If you need 3, you can find that it could be a very pricey treatment to get anti-venom. So at the moment, it's really only going to be given to small children that are likely to end up in the ICU otherwise, which means it's unfortunate there's this easy treatment that could minimize something that you could be sick for 3 days, but you don't want to do that if it's going to cost you $50,000. So, just finished up with a nice, pretty picture. But basically, I think the thing is, people are scared of scorpions. They think they're these horrible things, and they want to get, everything and just kill them and ignore them. But they've been on this planet a lot longer than we have. And with all of this research that is available and being done, it would be such a shame to try and get rid of scorpions or kill them and just stop trying to embrace what is available. And I hope that some of the research can continue to get funded and people don't just get bothered by the idea that they're being injected with scorpion venom. So there you have it. Any questions?
Yes.
If you were to be stung by a scorpion, what treatment could you start doing right away while you're trying to get professional help?
Well, if you're stung with a scorpion, you're probably not going to get professional help for starters. But ice the wounds. It'll help the toxin not to spread very much. And then, unfortunately, you probably have to treat the symptoms. There's not a lot. You can do some antihistamines, but yet that may not help. Your symptoms are probably going to peak after about 6 hours and should fully subside after about 3 days. Unless you happen to be in some crazy foreign country and get stung by something a little more serious than our scorpions here. There actually is one scorpion in Iran and Iraq that it has a nasty cytotoxin that will start eating away the skin around the injection site. That time you want to go to the hospital, because they have antivenoms for most of those. But for you, you're just going to want to ice it and treat it and hope that you didn't get a huge dosage. There are dry stings, and a lot of the times, for defensive purposes, you get little to no toxin other than just enough to get a lot of irritation. But because they're neurotoxins, you can get eyes twitching and muscle spasms, some pretty interesting and less than desirable consequences. But within 3 days, you should be good as new. Any other questions?
Let's thank the presenters today for an interesting afternoon. For the students in Dr. Durande's physics class, if you'll form a line to the right and come forward, we're going to present you with a flash drive that looks like a key. It's totally different than the normal flash drive that you've been accustomed to seeing. On it will be all 3 volumes of the Science Symposium papers for each and every contributor. So if you'll form a line to the right, the organic students hold tight and we'll get to you in a second. For the organic chemistry students, again to the right, then I will call your name and come up. You will receive your paper, and in the back of your paper will be your paper grade, your final exam grade, and your final grade. Also, Dr. Durande will give you one of the flash drives. Plus, those of you who wish to retrieve your CD, Professor Weiss has them here in one of 3 volumes. Check where your name fits, and that's the envelope you should be searching for your CD. Let's start off with Parker Stevens, Brett Worley, Josh, Tennille, Tyler? Oh, dude. Adi. Oh, there's Tyler. Amanda. Sasha. John Hayden. Thank you, John. Nira. Austin. Jessica. Megan. out. Jessica. And so, you did it. You did it. Sarah. Ashley? Rebecca? And Joe. Ruth? Where's Ruthie? I just saw Ruth. Oh, here's Ruth. Ted? Caltham? Stephen Hadid? Marilyn LaBoche. Christina, she's not here. No, there's not here. Elizabeth. Mark. Elizabeth, that's for you. Stephen B. Diana. Jordan. Kyle. Rhonda. It should be everyone. Yes? Okay. Again, find your CD. It's in one of the 3 volumes, 3 envelopes.
Thank you.